So a common consensus that I see people have about character duels is that the Cyber Dragon deck at grade 0 is not good, and that is just not correct because this deck is a lot better than what people give it credit for. Obviously it will have bad matchups because if your deck is not called Automat or Resonators, it's gonna have bad matchups like pretty much every other character duel deck, but there are a lot of different things you can do to minimize the impact of whatever bad matchup you're facing against if you play this deck correctly. So I won't go over too much about the deck list itself because it is pretty much the same, because it's a grade 0 deck, everybody will have the exact same list, but I will go over what the kind of philosophy about how to play this deck. So, the entire game plan of this deck, or what you should be doing at least, is to use this card. Cybernetic Overflow is your win condition. Even though you're technically only dealing damage with your fusion monsters, this is the thing that you want to focus on. This is what makes this deck better than the other decks. Like, this is the defining factor of what makes this deck unique. So Cybernetic Overflow says you can banish any number of Cyber Dragons from your hand, field, or graveyard. It has to be exactly Cyber Dragons, so um it has to if you're banishing something that is not the original Cyber Dragon, it has to change its name to Cyber Dragon, you know, like Cyber Dragon Core, who this card's name becomes Cyber Dragon while it's on the field or graveyard. You banish any number of them that have different levels, and then you destroy the same amount of cards on your opponent's field. And this doesn't target, and it destroys multiple cards at once. So it is by far the best form of removal we have in this entire format. The best trap as well, because there are no other traps that do the same thing that this card does. This card is just by far the best way that we have in this format to interrupt, so we gotta make good use of the fact that our deck has access to such a powerful trap card. It also has another effect that says if it's destroyed by a card effect, you add a cyber spell trap from your deck to your hand. Um, Even though we don't really have like an MST in our deck to pop it, there are ways that we can trigger it as well by using our own Chimeratech Rampage Dragon to pop it, which is something that you might want to consider if you want to get the search off of the trap card. So another tip that I want to give you before we hop into the replays is that if you're playing any character duel deck, not just, you know, the Cyber Dragon deck, you want to add as many Chronicle effects on your deck as possible, because that will increase the amount of points that you get at the end of the duel, and that will increase the amount of rewards that you get per duel just by having effects in your deck. That's basically free stuff that you get just by using effects on your cards. So as you can see, we are putting in all of these flame effects. I have wind effect on my cosmics. I have this ripple effect on my fusion support. So in my grade 5 Cyber Dragon deck, every single card is processed so that every card that I activate will count towards the point bonus at the very end. So obviously, as you can see, my Fiendish Chain is not processed because I am not playing this card in the grade 5 version, which is the one that I usually play. But if you are planning to play this deck a lot, or just any character duel deck, you will want to try to add as many processings as you can. So it doesn't have to be an effect like the flame one, because a lot of these are obtained by paying for the crystals, and you get these as a bonus. But what you can do is, if you go to the character duel exchange shop, you can go to items, you can see these stamps right here, like the stamps that you get for each character in character duels. These are also counted as Chronicle card effects. So you can just apply one of these stamps to each of your cards just by playing the format and then getting the orbs to get these stamps. You can use them to upgrade your cards and make them just give you more points just by playing them normally in your game. So with that said, let's actually hop into some replays so I can actually explain how this deck is supposed to be played. Alright, we will begin with the Shark matchup. This is not a very easy matchup just because of how the monsters that the deck makes have protection against destruction. But here's the tip number one of actually playing a deck. You want as many overflows as you could possibly get. So the ideal number is 2. So even though, as you can see, we already have a cybernetic overflow, you want a second copy. So most people would want to get the quick play fusion in this situation because you already have the trap. That is oftentimes not the best play. As you can see, we have a cyber emergency in our hand that grabs us a second cyber dragon core, and that can grab us the fusion on our next turn. So we already have access to the fusion. So in this situation, it is actually better to add a second copy of Cybernetic Overflow. And the reason is because if we have more copies of Cybernetic Overflow, it is less likely that our opponent can get rid of it before they commit to the combo. So setting free back row is a very common thing that you'll be doing with this deck. And this is what you are aiming to do every time, regardless if you have 1 overflow or 2 overflows in your hand. And that makes it really difficult for your opponent to be able to get rid of your overflow before they commit, because they have to basically guess where your overflow is, right? There is a 1 in 3 chance that they hit the overflow. So what you can do is you can just have the overflow set, and then wait for your opponent to combo, and then once they are done, you hit them at the right moment with your overflow, you cut them off of their combo, and then next turn, that is where you can strike with your fusion monsters. So another thing that you have to be just good about playing this deck is to know your opponent's matchup, to know where is the best moment to use your trap cards. And that is why it is a lot better when you have 2 overflows, because even if your opponent hits one of them, you can have a second one set to be able to use in your opponent's turn after they do their combo. And also some matchups, you will require multiple overflows to actually be able to get rid of their board, like the Neos matchup, because the Neos fusion monster has a effect destruction protection. So in that situation, you need both overflows to be able to destroy that fusion monster to be able to actually go for game. So there are certain matches where you definitely need 2 overflows, but even if you're playing a deck playing against a deck that loses to 1 overflow, you still want 2 overflows ideally, so that even if your opponent draws an MST or Cosmic and they hit one of the overflows, you have the second one just in case. The opponent's playing Sharks, they are going to just do the Shark combo. So this is where you want to know your matchup. So the Shark combo will go into Bahamut Shark and the Spider Drake. These are the 2 most important rank 4s that they are going to go into. So Bahamut Shark is perfect for being destroyed by overflow because it does not have a protection effect and you can pop it before it summons from the extra deck. But because they choose to make Bahamut Shark as their first rank 4, what we can do instead is not pop it yet. We can first use our Fiendish Chain to negate our opponent's Bahamut Shark so they don't summon the Xyz that actually has protection. And then when they use their second normal summon, we can destroy both the Bahamut Shark because we can't actually beat over it, and we can destroy the level 4 main deck monster that they have, and that completely cuts them out of extension. So now they used both of their normal summons, they don't have anything on the field, which means they can't special summon with Silent Angler, and that forces them to end their turn. So it passes back to us, and this is where we can use the core that I mentioned to add the Cyberload Fusion, so we don't have to worry about, last turn, on our first turn, we can use the search on the second overflow because you can add the fusion right now. And then before we use the fusion, we can just check our opponent's back row by popping it with the second overflow. So as you can see, both overflows are really good, even if our opponent only needs 1 overflow to deal with their board. It is really useful to have a second overflow for follow-up, just like in this situation where you can check your opponent's back row with it as well. Okay, in our second game, we're playing against actual good decks. But the thing about playing a grade 0 deck is that your opponent will actually always be playing the same grade as you. And even if you have unlocked a higher grade like me, like I have unlocked 5 grades for my Zane, as long as I'm only playing 0 graded cards in my deck, my opponent will also be only playing 0 graded cards in your deck. And that's how matchmaking works. It is dependent on the amount of graded cards you are actually playing inside your deck. So our opponent will be playing grade 0 Onomats, which means we basically know entirely what they are having in their deck. And they're gonna make a Force Focus, which checks our Fusion Monster, and then they're also gonna make a copy of Utopia. So the Force Focus does prevent us from using the effect of our Fusion Monster, but that does not matter because this is another tip that you want to do. No matter if you're going first or second, as long as you're playing a grade 0 version of Cyber Dragon, you want to set overflows. So even if you're going second, don't summon the fusion monster. You want to set overflows and wait for the right opportunity. So we didn't draw Cyber Dragon Core, which really sucks, but we do have our Overflow. So Overflow, Phoenix Chain, Overflow, really good trap cards that we have access to. We can wait it out and hit our opponent in the right timing, and then we can just hope that we draw into our core next turn so we can actually fusion summon. And we don't even have to draw into core. We can also draw into Cyber Emergency, or actually the fusion spell will also do it as well. So we have 9 cards in our deck that we can draw next turn that can bring us back into combo. So our main objective right now is to completely cut our opponent off of doing their combo. So the thing about Onomats is that they don't actually have a way in Archetype to force out the back row using the Xyz monsters. The only way in Archetype to force out the back row is with Gaga Bolt. And that is where the 2 overflows can be useful, because even if they pop one of them, you can have the second one active. And if they do decide to destroy one of the overflows, you get to use the Graveyard effect to add follow-up as well. So that is even more beneficial than to you than it is to them. So they're gonna go use Gaga's sister to make their monsters level 6. And this is where you want to be familiar with the matchup. So now I activate Cybernetic Overflow. What we're going to destroy is the monster in the EMZ and one of their level 6 monsters. So what this does is that because their deck doesn't have any high level monsters and they must use same level monsters to make their extra deck monsters, what we just did is that we completely clogged our opponent. So they can only summon main deck monsters in the main monster zones, and they can't really get rid of the Utopia Ray because it is just an Xyz monster that they have. And they have one level 6 monster. The only way they are getting level 6 monsters is via the effect of Gaga Sister. So they already used the effect, and we got rid of one of the 2 level 6 monsters, and the entire deck is level 4 monsters. So all they can do is normal summon a level 4 monster. They can't go into any of the Xyz monsters because they are clogged. And they can't even summon a second monster because all of their main monster zones are occupied. So it just completely cuts them off of any of their combos. So now they're forced to only attack, but we have the Phoenix Chain, obviously, to prevent them from attacking directly. And then we just draw our follow-up, one of our 9 cards that do the full combo. And then we can activate Cyberload Fusion to make our Rampage Dragon. We can pop our opponent's back row, just because we know that it's a double of nothing because they said it using their skill. But this is also where you can choose to pop your own overflow. So another play you can do right there is Rampage Dragon targets one of your opponent's back row plus your own overflow, chain link to overflow. And this allows you to destroy with overflow, and then the Rampage Dragon resolves, destroying the trap, and then because your trap is being destroyed by card effect, that also triggers the graveyard effect of the trap to search another cyber spell trap. But the reason why we didn't do that is because we want to use the effect of Rampage Dragon first to send 2 Cyber Dragons from our deck to the graveyard, and that allows us to banish more cards with Overflow. So that kind of depends on what you want to do. So like if you value the search, you will want to do the thing that I mentioned, like a Chainlink 2 Overflow. But if you want to destroy more cards like we do right now, you want to wait and then just use Overflow like normal. So we're gonna send 2 cards from our deck and then use Overflow to banish 3 cards. We're gonna activate Fusion Support. And the reason why we do that is because we have Chronicle effects on all of our cards, so that you want to activate as many cards as you possibly can. So we know that we already won because our opponent has no cards in hand and field. So we can just activate Fusion Support just to get more card activations, because for every Chronicle card we activate, we get more points because all of our cards have Chronicle effects. And also, for Cybernetic Fusion Support specifically, it lowers our life points, and having a lower life point also gives you more assessment points at the end of the game. So just something that you want to keep in mind. If you know that you have already won the game, you just want to activate as many cards as you could before you go in for lethal, just to maximize the amount of rewards that you're getting at the end of the duel. So we'll go in, we'll attack 2 times, and that will be lethal damage. Alright, we have one more replay. It is against another Onomat player. And again, we are going second. So this time we also didn't draw very well. We have the 2 fusions and no access to Overflow or Cyber Dragon Core, any way to search it. So we'll pretty much skip over what our opponent is doing. And the thing about playing a grade 0 deck and just playing the base version of Cyber Dragon is that your opponent will also be grade 0, and skill levels of grade 0 players vary a lot. So like new players are playing grade 0 decks, but they're also like good players, or like players who usually play other modes and already familiar with the game, also playing grade 0 decks as well. So sometimes you will be able to just win games by your opponent misplaying because they are a new player. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. Even if you're playing a deck that's not meta in this format, like something that's not Onomat or Resonators, you can still win games just by playing correctly, using your traps in the right timing, and just outskilling your opponent. So we drew Cyber Emergency, which means we can grab Core, and Core can of course grab Overflow, which is our win condition, quote unquote. We now want to activate our Cyber Load Fusion. So the reason we want to do that is usually you want to just leave your monsters on the field and then just set Overflow and pass, but because we have a second fusion, what we can do is use one of the fusions to make the Rampage, and then use the Rampage to send the Cyber Dragons to our graveyard. So this is better usually than to leave the monsters on the field. So like if you have multiple fusions, that is what you want to prioritize, because it is much harder for your opponent to force out your trap card if your monsters are not on the field. So for example, if you left your Cyber Dragons on the field, what your opponent can do is they can make something like M7, or more likely Malevolent Sin, that can bounce your monsters or banish your monsters from your field, and that reduces the amount of cards you can destroy with Overflow because you have less Cyber Dragons that you can banish. So they can actively diminish the value of your Overflow by just having monsters that you have on the field. So ideally, you want your Cyber Dragons to be in your hand and in your graveyard, because that is much, much harder for your opponent to interact with and diminish the value of your Overflow. That is also true when you're playing against a deck like Resonators, where they can send your Proto Cyber Dragon to your graveyard, because Proto Cyber Dragon is only treated as Cyber Dragon on the field. What smart players can do is they can force out your trap early by sending your Proto Cyber Dragon to the graveyard, either by a card effect or just by destroying it by something like an alternative White Dragon. So Resonators can send it with Dark-Hand Dragon, Blue Eyes White Dragon can send it with Alternative White Dragon, and that can diminish the value of your overflow. So if you could, you would want to make your fusion monster first, even if you can't attack your opponent directly, you still want to get the effect off to send the Cyber Dragons to your graveyard, because the Cyber Dragons are better in the graveyard than they are on your field. So we now want to attack as much as we could. We couldn't really attack over our Utopia Array, but that's completely fine. Again, our main objective is overflow. So as long as we can hit them with our overflow at the exact right moment, we will win the game. So our opponent will be making a rank 4 Malevolent Sin. So this is what I talked about, right? So if we had Cyber Dragons on our field, they could use Malevolent Sin to banish the Cyber Dragon, and now we can only destroy 2 cards instead of all 3. But because our Cyber Dragons are in the graveyard, then Malevolent Sin cannot banish our Cyber Dragons. They have to banish our Fusion Monster, which we don't really care about. It's coming back during our next turn. And now when they try to attack, we can use Overflow to destroy all 3 monsters that they have. So I don't know why they left a 0 attack monster on the field, probably because they are not familiar with this deck, but it doesn't really matter. We can destroy all of them, and then use the second fusion spell on during the end phase to make the second fusion. And now we can just activate as many card effects as we could. Again, we want to maximize our card activations just so we have more assessment points at the very end. This is not BM, it is actually something that you want to do to increase the points that you get. And now our opponent will scoop. I do not recommend scooping, even if you are in a losing position, because even if you lose, you get assessment points at the end. But if your opponent is taking too long, this is something that you might want to do. But that's it. I hope that gives you kind of an insight of how you play the grade 0 Cyber Dragon deck. It's pretty good. Obviously not top tier, because the top tier ones are undeniably honor mats and resonators, but it is on par, if not better, than pretty much all of the other character duel decks that we have at grade 0. So thanks for watching, and goodbye.